A $4.45 billion company just announced that they're going to be buying over $250 million worth of Bitcoin. This now makes them the 7th public company to come out today in 2024 alone and announce that they will actually be buying Bitcoin. So the floodgates have opened, but how many Bitcoin are left? This company has now scooped up over 4,000 coins. We know there's only 2 million Bitcoin sitting on the exchanges. How long is it going to take for those final 2 million coins to disappear and move into the hands of these publicly traded companies who don't appear to be wanting to sell for a very long time? Well, today we're going to be explaining all of that and more. And the company that has bought the Bitcoin is, of course, Marathon Digital. They came out with this announcement today. They are looking to raise $250 million to boost their Bitcoin holdings. So one of America's largest publicly traded Bitcoin mining firms has decided to raise that amount in a debt offering. Again, this is interesting. It's a debt offering. We have Metaplanet over in Japan actively printing fiat currency to buy Bitcoin. Okay. We also have Marathon, now a company that is, as you guys can see, $4.45 billion in size, also raising debt to buy Bitcoin. We obviously know that there are a number of other companies who are doing the exact same thing as that. You guys can see the list. This here, right there, I think, is the list of all of the publicly traded companies who have begun buying Bitcoin today in 2024. Okay, so let's zoom in and take a look at this list. DeFi Technologies. So far, they've just bought Bitcoin. They're not using debt to buy Bitcoin. We also have Semler Scientific. They are using debt to buy Bitcoin. They actually announced an issuance of $150 million of stock to go out there and buy Bitcoin. It's big. They're a $200 million company. Metaplanet, number 3 on that list, also is using debt over in the Japanese debt markets, the public debt markets, to buy Bitcoin. 2 out of the first 3 are using debt to buy Bitcoin. Boya just bought 100 million, and Bitcoin Depot has also bought Bitcoin. And obviously since then, today we are obviously talking about Marathon, the $4.45 billion company. So we have a lot of companies out there, not only buying Bitcoin in 2024, publicly traded companies, but they're also using the debt markets to buy Bitcoin. I think this is really interesting. And this is something that's really just not being discussed enough, okay? Again, what happens if all of these companies want to continue buying $150, $250 million of Bitcoin? There's just not enough coins sitting on these exchanges. We're going to talk more about scarcity in a moment, but I want to talk more about Marathon before we get to scarcity, because there could be some rabbit holes to discuss with Marathon, some positive and maybe some a little bit Orwellian and negative, but we're going to get there. So the company Marathon has already bought $100 million worth of Bitcoin in July. They're currently sitting on 20,000 Bitcoin on its corporate balance sheet, but that's not enough. They want to buy another 4,000 Bitcoin for their balance sheet and increase their holdings by 25%. This is a big buy. This is a big deal. And I think most people are simply not prepared on what happens next, okay? Now, Marathon, funny enough, actually hasn't, they haven't experienced this massive stock pump that we have seen in many other companies who have been obviously buying a lot of Bitcoin. As you can see, their stock price has been kind of sideways, chopping sideways. It's obviously had a good run from its 2020 lows, where you could have picked up the stock for about 40 cents. Today it's at $15. So it has more than 30x off its 2020 bottom. So it's obviously performed well in the past 4 years. But the more recently, we haven't quite seen that big spike that we have seen with a lot of these other publicly traded companies who have announced Bitcoin buys this year. Okay, you guys can see Metaplanet stock went bananas after it announced its first Bitcoin buy, and it's continued going bananas since. Semler Scientific, same thing. Saw a 70% rise in a month when it announced Bitcoin, and DeFi Technologies saw the same thing. Right now, Mara isn't seeing that kick yet. We will see whether it's going to materialize. But now let's start talking about maybe the broader mining space. We're going to get into that Orwellian rabbit hole with Marathon in a moment. But let's, talk about mining overall a little bit more. Because more recently, people have been noticing that the Bitcoin hash rate has, let's say, had a little bit of a tumble. Okay, now this here is the chart of the Bitcoin hash rate. It's probably not the best chart I could have found, you guys, to be entirely honest. But you can see it's been very, very volatile recently, extraordinarily volatile recently. It did actually crash from about 650 exahash to about 540 exahash. So that represents about, a 15% crash, so to say. So that is interesting. If I really zoom in on it, you guys will be able to see that a little bit clearer. So you can see this is the correction more recently people have been talking about, 650 all the way down to 561. But right now, hash rate has bounced back, and right now it's very close to its all-time high. So the fact that we have hash rate bouncing back, maybe this means that maybe we're not going to see this Bitcoin mining death spiral, because most people would know that every single time around the halvings, we see things like this. We see the Bitcoin hash rate be, let's say, very volatile around the halvings. Okay, that's what this chart here is showing you, because you can see the halvings dictated on this chart. 1, 2, 3, and then there's fourth one more recently. And you can see that the hash rate is very volatile around these periods. Again, it's a 12-year chart of Bitcoin, so it could be a little bit difficult to see and gauge exactly what we're talking about. But some people are saying, now that we have Marathon, okay, coming out and saying, look, we're going to actually be buying a lot of Bitcoin for the balance sheet. We're going to be using debt to buy Bitcoin for the balance sheet. Some people are speculating, saying that maybe the worst of this Bitcoin halving cycle, so to say, is over for the Bitcoin miners. And maybe they're going to start actually stop selling the amount of Bitcoin that they are selling, and they're going to start hodling as well. Okay. Now, this is the more interesting part. We have all of these publicly traded companies hodling Bitcoin. We named them. 6 of them this year have entered the space alongside Michael Saylor. We also have all of these ETFs hodling and hodling and hodling, collectively holding, let me double check. I was about to say a number, but I wouldn't be 100% sure of how much Bitcoin the ETFs hold. I believe it's about 1.1 million from memory. Let's check in. We haven't done an ETF check-in for a little while. Maybe we might come say g'day to the Bitcoin ETF stats sometime soon, but we can see, yeah, okay, there's well over 1 million Bitcoins, parked in these Bitcoin spot ETFs. And what happens if the miners also stop selling their Bitcoin? So this chart here is looking at the miner reserves. And we can see pretty clearly that right now, Bitcoin miners reserves are now at January 2021 levels. The miner sell-off appears to be complete. So that was a tweet put out there by Marty Party, kind of suggesting, hey, are we going to see more sell-offs in Bitcoin from all of these publicly traded companies? Or are we now going to start transitioning into an era where they're going to start accumulating again? Is the worst of the pain over? Certainly appears like it could be. It appears like there's some interesting things happening, okay? Now, before we discuss this chart, maybe we should discuss how the individual can avoid some pain, so to say. And that is obviously through securing their wealth the way they should be securing their wealth. And that is obviously backing up their Bitcoin hardware wallets with titanium, okay? Guys, we talk about this absolutely all the time. If you write down your Bitcoin backup words, which is your 12 words or your 24 words, private keys, they have a lot of names, but if you put those names on paper, they're simply not safe. This is why we always let you guys know about our show sponsor, Stampseed. They make the industry leading standard when it comes to Bitcoin backups. Okay, as you can see, you have some really nice titanium plates, and obviously you guys can grab absolutely anything you want from Stampseed, and you can use a promo code Luke15 as many times as you like, okay? So that'll get you 15% off absolutely anything you want from Stampseed. You can get your hands on Thor's hammer, as I call it. Again, it's a beautiful hammer. It's a beautiful product. They are absolutely indestructible. I actually saw on Twitter earlier in the week that the guys I might tell you about this guy in another stream. Maybe I'll keep this a secret for another day, because I am getting the eyes telling me I do have to wrap this stream up, but I can't do that without showing you this chart here, because this is, I believe, the chart that is impacting all of the publicly traded companies to do what they're doing in 2024. And that is the absolute undeniable performance of MicroStrategy in the yellow here. Up 995% since August 10th, 2020, when Michael Saylor began buying Bitcoin. And I think Eric Weiss summed it up nicely here in the comments. Trade of the decade. And yet, Not a single positive article in the Wall Street Journal. Fascinating. Very interesting. Now, speaking of something that is very interesting that I think a lot of people would be, let's say, tuning into right now, that is obviously the Donald Trump, Elon Musk interview. I might end this stream now. I'm going to go watch that one. And maybe, just maybe, I might do a live reaction to that at the tail end of that stream, okay? Because as we can see, governments are trying to censor the conversation. This here is the European Commissioner threatens Elon Musk about his Donald Trump interview tonight. How dare you interview the former president of America? He's too dangerous for democracy. How dare you? I mean, just think about the world we're living in right now. But it wasn't only the European Commission. It was also the US government also looking to, as you can see, try to censor Elon. Honestly, incredibly just wild to think about. Okay, so I think it's going to be big, and I may or may not come back for a second stream later. Let me know in the comments down below if you want me to jump on and dissect what's going on between Trump and Elon, and I will. And with all that said, guys, again, enjoy 15% off